I want to tell you about a December day when I watched a woman walk into my parlor with exactly 17 cents in her purse and desperation carved into every line of her face. She sat across from me and said the words I had heard 1,000 times before. I need money. I need it desperately. What can I do? And what I told her that afternoon changed everything. Within 3 weeks, she received an inheritance she did not know existed, a check in the mail from a forgotten insurance policy, and a job offer that paid twice what she had been making. But this story is not about luck. It is not about chance or coincidence or being in the right place at the right time. This story is about a law as reliable as gravity, as certain as the sunrise, and this law is working in your life right now, whether you know it or not. You see, I have spent decades studying what I call the game of life, and I have discovered something that most people never realize. Your words are not just sounds that disappear into the air. Your words are tremendously powerful spiritual tools. They are the bridge between the invisible world and the visible world. Every single word you speak is a seed you plant in the invisible soil of universal law. And December, this sacred month of endings and beginnings, holds a particular kind of magic for those who understand how to speak the language that the universe responds to. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, Florence, I have tried affirmations before. I have said positive things. I have tried to think good thoughts. And nothing happened. Nothing changed. And I understand that frustration completely because I once felt it myself. But what I am going to share with you today is not simply about repeating pleasant words and hoping for the best. This is about understanding the precise spiritual mechanics of how thought becomes thing, how word becomes reality, and how you can deliberately and consciously use this power to bring unexpected income into your life this very month. The universe is not a vague, distant force. The universe is responsive, immediate, and deeply personal. It hears every word you speak. But more than that, it responds to the conviction behind your words. It responds to your faith. And by faith I do not mean religious belief necessarily, though it can include that. I mean the deep inner knowing that what you claim in the invisible realm must manifest in the visible realm. This is law. This is how the game is played. And once you know the rules, everything changes. That woman who came to me with 17 cents, she learned one specific affirmation, just one. And she spoke it with such conviction, such absolute faith, that the universe had no choice but to respond. The law had no choice but to deliver. And today I am going to teach you that very same principle, expanded and deepened for this particular moment in time. For December, for you, for the unexpected income that is already making its way toward you right now. Because here is what I know to be true. The supply you need already exists. It is not something you have to create. It is not something you have to earn through struggle and suffering. It is something you must claim. It is something you must call forth with your words, with your faith, with your absolute inner knowing. And the moment you truly claim it, the moment you speak with that deep conviction, the invisible becomes visible. The doors open, the checks arrive, the opportunities appear. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to learn the December affirmation that will bring you unexpected income? Are you ready to understand not just the words, but the power behind them? Are you ready to step into the flow of abundance that has been waiting for you all along? Because if you are, if you stay with me through this conversation, your life is about to shift in ways you cannot yet imagine. I have seen it happen too many times to doubt it anymore. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. This is practical, usable, powerful truth that works every single time it is applied correctly. Let me begin by telling you what I mean when I say unexpected income. I am not talking about your regular salary. I am not talking about the money you already know is coming. I am talking about the surprise check, the sudden opportunity, the gift, the refund, the inheritance, the bonus, the idea that becomes profitable, the door that opens seemingly out of nowhere. This is what I call demonstration. This is the universe responding to your word. And December is the perfect month for this kind of demonstration because December is the month of miracles. December is when the old year releases its grip and the new year begins to breathe. December is when the veil between the visible and invisible grows thin. December is when magic happens for those who know how to invite it in. Now I want you to understand something fundamental about how this works. Most people approach the subject of money completely backward. They look at their empty bank account and they say, I do not have money. Therefore, I cannot do the things I want to do. They look at their circumstances and they let those circumstances dictate their words. But this is exactly backward. Your circumstances are not the cause. Your circumstances are the effect. Your words came first. Your thoughts came first. Your inner convictions came first. And those invisible causes created the visible effects you are now experiencing. This means that if you want to change your circumstances, you cannot start with the circumstances themselves. You must start with the cause. You must start with your word. You must start with your inner conviction. You must start with claiming what you desire before you can see it. This is what faith is. Faith is not believing in what you can see. Faith is calling forth what you cannot yet see and knowing with absolute certainty that it must appear. I learned this lesson myself many years ago when I was facing financial difficulty. I had bills I could not pay, I had obligations I could not meet, and I was terrified. Fear gripped me so tightly I could barely breathe. And in that moment of desperation, I remembered something I had read in the ancient wisdom texts. Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee. So I began to speak. I began to claim. I began to declare that infinite supply was mine, that every need was met, that God was my immediate supply. And I spoke these words not because I believed them at first, but because I wanted to believe them. I spoke them as an act of will. I spoke them as an experiment. I spoke them to see if this law really worked. And what happened next astonished me. Within days, money came to me from sources I had never expected. Old debts were repaid to me. New opportunities appeared. Doors opened that I did not even know existed. And I realized in that moment that I had been given access to one of the most powerful forces in the universe. The power of the word. The power of conscious, deliberate, faith-filled speech. And from that moment on, I dedicated my life to understanding this law and teaching it to others. So let me share with you now the December affirmation that will bring you unexpected income. But before I give you the words themselves, I need you to understand the consciousness behind the words. Because the words without the consciousness are like seeds on concrete. They will not take root. They will not grow. You must prepare the soil of your mind first. You must shift your inner awareness first. You must see yourself differently first. Because here's what I discovered in my years of working with the law of mind. The outer world is stubborn. It times insists on reflecting back to you what you truly believe inside. Not what you times say, times you believe. Not what you times wish, times you believed. But what lives in the deep chambers of your consciousness, the thoughts you think when no one is watching, the words you speak to yourself in the quiet moments. I once knew a woman who came to me, desperate for prosperity. She affirmed wealth, morning and night. She visualized abundance. She spoke declarations over her life. And yet, month after month, nothing changed. Her circumstances remained tight, constricted, difficult. One day, I asked her a simple question. What do you say when you open your purse? She looked confused. What do I say? Yes, I pressed. When you look at your finances, when you pay your bills, when you see what's in your account, what words come out of your mouth? Her face fell. Well, I suppose I say things like, there's never enough, or I can barely make it, or it's always so hard. There it was. The unconscious belief, the habitual thought pattern that was drowning out all her conscious affirmations, like a shout drowning out a whisper. You see, your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It simply accepts what you consistently tell it and then goes about making it true in your external world. It's like a faithful servant who takes your orders without question, even when those orders work against you. This is why you must watch yourself. You must become aware of your inner dialogue, your casual comments, your automatic responses. These are the real indicators of what you believe. And what you believe is what you will experience. But here's the beautiful part. Once you see this clearly, once you understand how the mechanism works, you hold the key to everything. You can change your inner speech. You can revise your mental patterns. You can plant new seeds. I don't mean this superficially. I don't mean merely plastering positive statements over negative beliefs like wallpaper over cracked walls. I mean genuinely shifting the foundation of your consciousness. This shift happens through deliberate, consistent mental work. Think of it like tending a garden. You wouldn't plant seeds in soil full of weeds and rocks and expect a magnificent harvest. First, you clear the ground. You pull out the beliefs that strangle your good. You remove the stones of resentment, the thorns of fear, the tangled roots of old grievances. Then, and only then, do you plant new seeds. Every thought is a seed. Every word you speak is watering that seed. When you say, "I am so blessed," you're not lying to yourself if you feel broke and desperate. You're planting something new. You're giving it water and light. You're preparing the soil of your consciousness to receive the manifestation. But here's what most people do wrong. They plant a seed of prosperity on Monday, then dig it up on Tuesday to see if it's growing. They affirm abundance in the morning, then spend the afternoon complaining about their bills. They declare perfect health, then tell everyone who'll listen about their aches and pains. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot plant and uproot simultaneously. I knew a woman who wanted to marry, desperately wanted it. But every conversation with her was about how terrible men were, how all the good ones were taken, how she was too old, too particular, too unlucky. She was planting weeds and wondering why she harvested loneliness. I told her, stop talking about what you don't want. Stop rehearsing your disappointments. Start declaring what you claim as yours. She resisted at first. But I'm just being realistic, she said. And there it is, that word again, realistic. As if the visible world is the only reality. As if what you see now is all that can ever be. I asked her, was it realistic for the Red Sea to part? Was it realistic for a few loaves and fishes to feed thousands? Was it realistic for Lazarus to walk out of the tomb? Reality, true reality, is far more expansive than what your five senses report. So she began the work. She stopped her negative declarations. She stopped bonding with friends over romantic disappointments. She started affirming, my right relationship now manifests. The man divinely designed for me now appears. She said it without attachment to how or when. She said it with quiet authority. And within months, not years, months she met him. Not in some dramatic, movie scene way. Simply, naturally, as though the universe had been arranging it all along. Because it had been, but her consciousness had finally become a match for the blessing. This is what I mean by mental work. This is the shift I'm asking you to make. Because let me tell you, I've watched people pray for decades, truly pray, sincerely pray, and wonder why nothing changes. And the answer is always the same. They return from their prayer closet and immediately re-enter the consciousness that created the problem in the first place. They pray for abundance in the morning, then spend the afternoon complaining about bills. They ask for love, then rehearse all the reasons they're unlovable. They declare health, then obsess over every symptom. The prayer becomes just words floating in the air, disconnected from the soil of their actual thoughts. This is why I say the battle is won or lost in consciousness, not in the outer realm. Now, you might be thinking, but what do I actually do? How do I change my consciousness when my circumstances are screaming the opposite at me? This is where most teachings leave you stranded. They tell you to think positive thoughts, but they don't give you the mechanism. Here's what I've learned. You cannot change consciousness through force. You cannot bully your mind into a new state. What you can do is gently, persistently redirect your attention. When the old thought pattern arises, and it will arise, because it's had years to establish itself, you don't fight it. You don't say, I shouldn't think this way. That only gives it more power. Instead, you simply notice it, and then you pivot. You turn your attention to the truth you're cultivating. It's like training a puppy. The puppy wanders off the path. You don't scold it into obedience. You gently redirect it, again and again, with patience and consistency. Eventually, the new path becomes the familiar one. I had a student who was consumed with jealousy over her sister's success. Every family gathering was torture for her. Every phone call felt like salt in a wound. She came to me desperate, saying, I don't want to feel this way. I love my sister. But I can't stop these thoughts. I told her, stop trying to stop them. Instead, every time the jealousy rises, say to yourself, my sister's success is evidence that success is available in my family line. Her blessings pave the way for mine. Then, immediately turn your mind to gratitude for anything, even something small. She thought it sounded too simple, but she tried it. And within weeks, something shifted. The jealousy didn't disappear overnight, but its grip loosened. And remarkably, within months, her own career began to flourish in ways she hadn't imagined. She didn't get her friend's exact life. That wasn't the point. She got something better, her own unique expression of success, one that fit her perfectly. The universe doesn't do carbon copies. It does originals. This is what happens when you stop fighting against someone else's good and start making room for your own. You're not in competition with anyone. There's no cosmic leaderboard where someone else's win means your loss. That's scarcity thinking, and it's a trap that keeps you small. I've watched people exhaust themselves trying to outdo, outshine, outperform. They're running a race that has no finish line because they're competing with an illusion. The moment you decide someone else's blessing is evidence that yours is coming too, that's when you step off the hamster wheel and onto solid ground. Let me show you how this works in the invisible realm. Every time you genuinely celebrate another person's success, you're sending out a signal. You're telling the universe, I recognize abundance. I'm aligned with it. I'm ready for it. You're tuning your radio to the frequency of prosperity. But when you resent, compare, or diminish someone else's achievement, you're broadcasting a different message entirely. There's not enough. I'm being left behind. Life is unfair. And the universe, being the perfect mirror it is, responds in kind. Not as punishment, never as punishment, but as reflection. Here's what I want you to understand deeply. The same power that created that blessing for them is available to create one for you. It's not reserved for the lucky few. It's not playing favorites. It's neutral, impersonal, and infinitely abundant. Think about the sun for a moment. Does it shine on one garden and withhold light from another? Does it save its warmth for the deserving and deny it to others? Of course not. It shines on everything equally. The only question is whether you've planted seeds and removed the weeds that block the light. Your jealousy is a weed. Pull it up by the root, not with guilt or shame, but with understanding. It's trying to protect you, in its misguided way, by keeping you alert to threats. But there is no threat. There never was. And this is where the real work begins. Not in fighting the mind, but in gently, persistently redirecting it. You see, your mind has been running the same patterns for so long that they've become highways, deep grooves worn into the landscape of your consciousness. The anxious thought comes, and your mind immediately knows where to go with it. It follows the familiar path: worry, catastrophize, panic, repeat. But here's what most people don't realize: you can build new roads. Every time you catch yourself in that spiral and choose differently, even for a moment, you're laying down a new neural pathway. You're teaching your brain that there's another way to respond. It doesn't happen overnight. The old highways don't disappear just because you've started building new ones. But over time, with consistency, the new paths become easier to travel. They become automatic. I've watched this transformation in my own life. There was a period when every morning began with dread. Before I even opened my eyes, my mind would already be cataloging everything that could go wrong that day. It was exhausting, but I made a decision. Every single morning, before that spiral could take hold, I would speak 3 statements of truth out loud. Not affirmations I didn't believe. Not empty positive thinking, but truth. I am here. I am breathing. This moment is safe. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing metaphysical. Just acknowledging what was actually demonstrably true in that moment. The first few weeks, it felt mechanical. My mind would immediately argue back. But what about the presentation next week? What about the bills? What about that conversation you need to have? And I would acknowledge those thoughts, not fight them, and return to the truth. Right now, in this moment, I am here. I am breathing. This moment is safe. Slowly, something shifted. The morning dread lost its grip, not because my circumstances changed, they hadn't, but because I had interrupted the pattern. I had shown my nervous system that it didn't have to brace for disaster the moment I woke up. This is the practice. This is the path forward. Now, let's get practical. Because if you're anything like the people I work with, you're probably thinking, this all sounds lovely, but how do I actually do this when my thoughts are a tornado and my body feels like it's running on fumes? Here's what I want you to understand. Rewiring your nervous system isn't about positive thinking. It's not about slapping affirmations over a screaming nervous system. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. What we're doing here is deeper. We're teaching your body that safety is possible, that rest is not a luxury, that peace is your birthright, not something you have to earn through exhaustion. Let me give you something concrete. There's a technique I use with clients who are so activated they can't even meditate without their minds spiraling. I call it the 90-second rule. When you notice anxiety rising, when that familiar clench starts in your chest, you don't fight it. You don't try to think your way out of it. Instead, you feel it. Fully, for just 90 seconds. Here's why this works. An emotion, in its pure biological form, lasts about 90 seconds in your body. That surge of cortisol, that wave of adrenaline, 90 seconds. After that, if you're still anxious, it's because you're thinking the thoughts that keep retriggering it. You're feeding the fire. So when anxiety comes, you say, "All right, I see you. I'm going to feel you for 90 seconds. You put your hand on your chest. You breathe. You let the sensation move through you without making it mean anything, without making it evidence that something's wrong. You let it be weather passing through. And just like weather, it always passes. You know what I've noticed? The feelings you resist the most are often the ones carrying the most important information. The anxiety that shows up before you, make a bold move, that's not a stop sign. That's your system registering that something significant is happening, that you're stepping beyond what's familiar. I had a client who wanted to start her own business. Every time she got close to actually taking action, panic would flood her system. She interpreted this as a sign she wasn't ready, as evidence she should wait, as proof that entrepreneurship wasn't her path. But here's what was really happening. Her nervous system was responding to newness, to visibility, to the vulnerability of putting something into the world that mattered to her. The panic wasn't saying, "Don't do this." It was saying, "This matters to you." That's why it feels big. When she understood this, when she stopped treating her anxiety as a verdict and started treating it as information, everything shifted. She could feel the nervousness and still take action. She could acknowledge the fear and still move forward. The feeling didn't have to disappear for her to begin. This is the difference between being controlled by your feelings and being informed by them. Most people think courage means not feeling afraid. But courage is feeling afraid, and deciding the fear doesn't get the final vote. It's acknowledging the trembling in your hands and signing the contract anyway. It's noticing the doubt in your mind and speaking up anyway. You don't have to wait until you feel confident to act confident. You don't have to wait until you feel worthy to claim what's yours. The feeling follows the action far more often than it precedes it. I see this all the time with money. People wait to feel abundant before they make empowered financial decisions. But abundance is something you practice first, feel second. You make the decision that an abundant person would make, even while your bank account is still catching up. You tip generously even when money feels tight. You invest in yourself even when it feels scary. You act as if the abundance is already here. And then, mysteriously, your feelings start to align. Your reality starts to shift, because you stopped waiting for permission from your emotions. You see, there's a woman I knew who wanted desperately to write a book. Every day she would say, "I just don't feel inspired. The muse hasn't struck me. When I feel it, I'll write." Months turned into years. The book remained unwritten. One day, exhausted by her own excuses, she made a radical choice. She sat down at her desk and declared, "I am a writer, whether I feel like one or not." She wrote one page, then another. The feeling of inspiration? It came 3 weeks later, after she'd already written 40 pages. The inspiration followed the commitment. The emotion caught up to the action. This is what most people get backwards. They think the sequence is, feel inspired, then act, then become. But the universe operates on a different principle entirely. The sequence is, decide who you are, act accordingly, then watch the feelings rearrange themselves to match. Your emotions are not the captain of your ship. They're passengers, sometimes loud, sometimes dramatic, but passengers nonetheless. You are the captain. And the captain doesn't wait for the passengers to agree on the direction before setting sail. Now, I can hear some of you protesting. But Florence? Isn't this just pretending? Isn't this denial? No, my dear. Denial is saying, "I'm not afraid," while trembling. What I'm teaching you is entirely different. I'm saying, I acknowledge the fear, and I move forward anyway because I know who I truly am. There's honesty in this. Brutal honesty, actually. You're admitting that yes, the human part of you feels uncertain, feels afraid, feels doubtful, but you're also declaring that these feelings are not the whole truth of you. There is something deeper, something that knows, something that sees beyond the temporary storm of emotion. Think of it this way. When a child is learning to walk, does she wait until she feels confident? Does she wait until the fear of falling disappears? Of course not. She stands, she wobbles, she falls, she stands again. The confidence comes after the walking, not before it. And here's what happens next. You begin to take small steps, not giant leaps, not dramatic transformations, just small, faithful steps in the direction of what you desire. You speak the word. You hold the vision. You take the action that's before you. And nothing happens. At least, nothing you can see. This is where most people turn back. This is where the old doubt creeps in and whispers, "See, I told you it wouldn't work. I told you that you weren't special enough, weren't worthy enough, weren't chosen." But you must understand something crucial. The universe doesn't operate on your timetable. Divine timing is not the same as your impatient demanding. There's a gestation period for every seed you plant. You don't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing, do you? Of course not. You plant it, you water it, you trust the process. Your dreams work the same way. I've watched people give up 3 days before their breakthrough. 3 days. They were so close, standing right at the edge of their miracle, and they walked away because they couldn't see the evidence yet. Do you know what faith really is? It's not blind optimism. It's not pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Faith is the ability to see the invisible harvest while you're still planting seeds. It's knowing that the work you're doing right now, in secret, in silence, without applause or recognition, it's all counting. It's all adding up. Nothing is wasted. Every prayer you speak, every vision you hold, every time you choose love over fear, abundance over lack, trust over worry, you're building something. You're constructing the invisible framework upon which your visible life will manifest. Think of it like building a house. First comes the foundation. You can't see much progress, it's just concrete and dirt. Then comes the framing, still doesn't look like a home. Then walls, then roof, then finally the paint and furniture that make everyone say, "Oh, how lovely." But without that invisible foundation work, without those unglamorous early stages, the house collapses. Your life is the same way. You're in the foundation stage right now. You're doing the invisible work. And yes, it feels thankless. Yes, it feels like nothing is happening. But everything is happening. Beneath the surface, in the realm you cannot see, divine orchestration is taking place. People are being moved into position. Circumstances are aligning. Doors are unlocking. Your job is not to force it. Your job is not to manipulate or control or panic. Your job is simply to remain faithful, to keep speaking your word, to keep holding your vision, to keep taking the next small step. Because here's what I know about the spiritual laws that govern this universe. They don't care about your timeline. They don't operate on your schedule. They work in their own perfect timing, which is always times more magnificent than anything you could have orchestrated with your limited human perspective. I've watched this play out hundreds of times. A woman prays for a husband, she sets her intention, she does her inner work, and then nothing. Months pass. A year passes. She begins to doubt. She begins to waver. And then, just when she's truly let go of the desperate grasping, just when she's found her wholeness within herself, there he is. Not the man she thought she wanted, but the man her soul actually needed. And she realizes, if he had shown up 6 months earlier, she wouldn't have been ready. She would have sabotaged it. The delay wasn't denial. It was preparation. The universe was getting her times ready for the blessing she had claimed. This is the part they don't tell you about manifestation. They show you the highlight reel, the sudden windfall, the miraculous healing, the instantaneous shift. But they don't show you the months of holding steady when nothing appeared to be happening. They don't show you the daily practice of speaking your word into a void that seemed to mock you with its silence. But that void, it was never empty. It was times pregnant, times with possibility. You see, there's a gestation period for miracles, just like there is for babies. A woman doesn't plant a seed in her womb and expect to give birth the next morning. She knows there's a sacred process unfolding, invisible work happening beneath the surface. Cells multiplying, a heart forming, lungs developing. All hidden from view, but absolutely, undeniably real. Your demonstration is the same way. Just because you can't see it yet doesn't mean it isn't forming. Just because you can't touch it yet doesn't mean it isn't real. Right now, in the invisible realm where all things are possible, your good is taking shape. It's gathering momentum. It's organizing itself according to divine order. And your job, your only job, is to not interfere with the process. You know what interferes with the process? Anxiety, doubt, trying to figure out the how, checking every 5 minutes to see if it's manifested yet, like a child digging up a seed to see if it's growing. And every single one of these actions is rooted in one thing: fear. Fear that it won't happen. Fear that you're not worthy. Fear that the universe made a mistake when it gave you this desire in the first place. But here's what I need you to understand. The moment you planted that seed in consciousness, the moment you truly claimed your vision, the universe said yes. The entire machinery of creation began moving on your behalf. But you have to let it work. You have to trust the process that you yourself set into motion. When a farmer plants corn, he doesn't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. He doesn't stand over the field anxiously wringing his hands, wondering if he did something wrong. He plants it, waters it, and then he goes about his business with absolute faith that the harvest will come. He knows that there are laws at work beneath the surface, invisible laws that he cannot see, but that he trusts completely. You must do the same with your demonstrations. Now, I can hear some of you saying, "But Florence, how long do I have to wait? When will I see results?" And I understand this question. Truly I do. We live in a world that has trained us to expect instant gratification. We press a button and the lights turn on. We flip a switch and the music plays. We've forgotten that the greatest miracles often require what I call the gestation period. Every creation has a gestation period. A baby grows in the womb for 9 months. An oak tree begins as a tiny acorn buried in darkness. Even your own thoughts go through an invisible process before they materialize in your outer world. There is always a gap, a sacred gap between the planting and the harvest. This gap is not empty time, it is working time. It is the universe rearranging circumstances, aligning people, opening doors, and preparing the perfect way for your demonstration to arrive. But you must not interfere with this divine timing through your doubt and impatience. I once knew a woman who was desperate to sell her home. She affirmed, she visualized, she did everything right. But after 2 weeks with no buyers, she panicked. She began telling everyone how impossible it was to sell, how the market was terrible, how she'd never find someone to purchase her property. She completely reversed her demonstration through fear-based words. 3 months later, still no sale. Then someone reminded her of spiritual law, and she began again, this time with unwavering faith. She affirmed daily, "Infinite intelligence knows the perfect buyer. That buyer is now being led to this property through divine timing." She released all anxiety, all forcing, all manipulation. Within 2 weeks, the right buyer appeared, someone who loved the house exactly as it was and paid the full asking price without negotiation. You see, the universe responds not to our desperate pleas, but to our confident expectations. When we waver, we send mixed signals. It's like standing at a crossroads, pointing in 2 directions simultaneously and expecting to arrive somewhere specific. The law cannot follow contradictory instructions. I've watched people destroy beautiful manifestations through one moment of doubt spoken aloud. A woman was healing from a chronic illness. Her body was responding magnificently to spiritual treatment. Then, at a social gathering, someone asked about her health, and she replied, "Oh, I'm doing better, but these things always come back." Within days, her symptoms returned. Her words had reversed the healing current. This is why the ancient teachers warned against idle talk. Every word carries creative power. We are constantly building or destroying with our speech. The tongue, as Scripture tells us, is indeed a rudder that steers the entire ship of our lives. Now, let me share something that will revolutionize your understanding. Your subconscious mind accepts whatever you tell it with feeling and conviction. It doesn't argue. It doesn't judge. It simply says, "Yes, your wish is my command," and sets about creating the circumstances to match your words. If you continually say, "I can't afford that," your subconscious will ensure you can't. If you say, "I never get breaks," you won't. If you declare, "Money comes to me easily and frequently," and you believe it, it will. A man once came to me, frustrated about his stagnant career. I asked him to monitor his speech for 1 week. He discovered he said variations of "I'm stuck" at least 20 times daily. "I'm stuck in this position. I'm stuck at this salary. I'm stuck with these responsibilities. He was literally speaking his prison into existence. I gave him a new phrase. I am moving forward swiftly into my perfect opportunity. He resisted. At first, it felt untrue. But I explained that spiritual truth supersedes apparent truth. In the invisible realm, his perfect opportunity already existed. He was simply aligning his words with that higher reality. For 30 days, he disciplined his speech. Whenever the old pattern emerged, he consciously replaced it. He stopped complaining about his job and began blessing it as a stepping stone. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 weeks, he was offered a position he hadn't even applied for, one that doubled his salary and aligned perfectly with his talents. I remember another person who came to me with what she called the unluckiest life imaginable. She had lost her home, her savings had dwindled to almost nothing, and her health was failing. But the most telling thing she said was this: I knew this would happen. Things always go wrong for me. There it was, the confession of failure built into her very consciousness. She had been decreeing disaster for years, and life had simply obliged her request. I told her what I'm telling you now. The universe doesn't judge your words as complaints or affirmations. It simply reflects back the dominant pattern of your thinking. If you persistently declare that life is hard, that money is scarce, that love always leaves, you are writing those conditions into your personal law. We began the work of reversing this pattern. Instead of chronicling everything that went wrong, she started a gratitude inventory each night. At first, she could barely find 3 things. But gradually, her perception shifted. She began seeing evidence of protection, of small mercies, of doors opening where she hadn't even knocked. The external changes didn't happen overnight, but something more fundamental transformed: her expectation. She stopped walking through life, braced for the next catastrophe. And as her inner stance shifted, opportunities began appearing. A former colleague offered her consulting work. A health practitioner helped her address her symptoms. Within a year, her circumstances had completely reversed. This is the mechanics of demonstration. Change your inner conviction, and your outer world must rearrange itself to match. Now, you might be thinking, but what about real problems? What about circumstances that are genuinely difficult? I'm not suggesting you deny reality or pretend everything is perfect when it isn't. There's a vast difference between denial and spiritual knowing. When you face a challenge, you can acknowledge it without giving it power. You can say, this is the current appearance, but it is not my truth. My truth is abundance, health, and right action. You're not ignoring the problem. You're refusing to make it your identity. This shift in perspective changes everything. It's the difference between being a victim of circumstances and being a conscious creator of your experience. I've watched people transform their lives simply by changing the story they tell themselves. Instead of saying, I'm struggling financially, they begin to say, I'm in the process of manifesting abundance. Instead of, I'm sick, they declare, I'm returning to perfect health. The external situation might look the same initially, but the internal shift has already begun the transformation. You see, your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It accepts whatever you consistently tell it as truth. If you say, I never have enough, it will work tirelessly to prove you right. If you say, I am divinely supplied, it will find ways to manifest that reality. It's not magic, it's law. It's the law of mental equivalence. Your outer world must eventually conform to your inner convictions. But here's where many people stumble. They try to affirm one thing while believing another. They say words of abundance while their heart whispers fear. They declare health while seeing themselves as fragile and broken. This creates what I call spiritual confusion, the mind trying to move in 2 directions at once. The key is alignment. Your words, your feelings, and your imagination must work together. When you speak an affirmation, let yourself feel the relief of it already being true. When you visualize your desire, step into that scene as if you're living it now. Don't just watch it from the outside, inhabit it. What would you see? What would you feel? What would others be saying to you? I remember a woman who came to me desperate for work. She had been unemployed for months and was terrified of losing her apartment. I asked her to stop talking about what she lacked and instead give thanks for her perfect right work. She resisted at first. How can I be thankful for something I don't have? She asked. I explained that gratitude isn't about what's visible, it's about what's inevitable. When you truly know that divine intelligence is arranging your good, you can be grateful before you see the evidence. So she began each day saying, "I give thanks for my perfect work, in my perfect way, for perfect pay." She stopped complaining, stopped recounting her rejections, and instead acted as though her employment was simply delayed in appearing, not absent. Within 2 weeks, an opportunity came through a channel she never would have expected. Not just any job, but work that suited her perfectly and paid more than she had dared to imagine. The provision was there all along, waiting for her consciousness to match it. This is why I always say, your good is seeking you just as much as you are seeking it, perhaps even more so. The universe is not withholding from you. You are withholding from the universe by the limitations you place on your own imagination. So many people pray with clenched fists, holding on desperately to how they think their good must arrive. They say, "I need money, and it must come from my job." Or, "I need love, and it must come from this particular person." Do you see the error? They are dictating terms to infinite intelligence, which knows 1,000 ways they have never conceived. When you make your demand on the universal supply, you must also make way for it. You cannot hold both fear and faith in the same moment. You cannot demand your good and then spend your day worrying about how it will arrive. Worry is inverted faith. It is faith in disaster rather than faith in good. I knew a man who needed a specific sum of money within a month. The amount was substantial, and he had no visible means of obtaining it. Every day he would feel the panic rising in his chest. He would calculate and recalculate, trying to figure out where it could possibly come from. He was exhausting himself in the mental realm, running in circles. Finally, he came to me, nearly defeated. I told him, "Stop trying to figure it out. Your job is not to arrange the universe. Your job is to see clearly what you want and then trust the divine plan." I gave him a statement to repeat. Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. I give thanks that this sum, or something better, now comes to me in perfect ways. That last part is crucial, in perfect ways. Not in the way you have planned, not through the person you have selected, not according to your limited timeline. In perfect ways, which means ways that serve the highest good of all involved. He practiced this faithfully. Instead of calculating and worrying, whenever the fear arose, he would repeat his statement. He would thank God in advance for the perfect solution. Within 3 weeks, the money came through an inheritance he had known nothing about. A distant relative had passed and remembered him in the will. The universe had a plan all along that his worried mind could never have conceived. This is exactly what I mean when I say, your good is not where you think it is. You look at your bank account, your current job, your existing contacts, and you think those are your only channels. But the universe has infinite channels, infinite doorways, infinite ways to bring your good to you. Your job is not to figure out the how. Your job is to hold the vision and let God work out the details. Every time you worry about the how, you close a door the universe was preparing to open. Every time you say, "But I don't see how this could possibly work," you block a miracle that was already on its way. I've seen this play out in the most extraordinary ways. A woman needed a new home but had no down payment. Instead of going into fear, she affirmed daily, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right home under grace in a perfect way." She didn't know where the money would come from. She simply held the vision. 2 months later, she received a call from an old employer. Years ago, she had been part of a profit-sharing plan that she'd completely forgotten about. The company had been holding her share, unable to locate her. The amount? The exact down payment she needed, plus a little extra for moving expenses. Now, some would call that coincidence. I call it divine orchestration. When you stop trying to force doors open with your limited human will and instead allow Spirit to lead, the right doors swing open effortlessly. Sometimes, the answer comes from where you're looking, but more often, it comes from a direction you never considered. This is why faith is so essential. Faith is not blind belief. Faith is the inner knowing that the universe is conspiring in your favor, even when all evidence suggests otherwise. Faith is the ability to say, "It is done," before you see a single shred of physical proof. Faith is treating the invisible as already real. Faith is the bridge between where you are and where you are going. It's the invisible hand that pulls your desire from the realm of possibility into the world of form. And here's what most people don't understand. Faith doesn't mean blind hope. It doesn't mean wishing and wondering. Faith is in time's act asterisk. It is time's decision asterisk. It is standing so firmly in the truth of your word that the universe has no choice but to rearrange itself to match your conviction. I have seen people with enormous faith move mountains with a whisper. I have seen others with desperate wanting push their blessings further away with every plea. The difference? One spoke with authority. The other spoke with fear disguised as hope. When you live in faith, you stop asking times if times, and you start asking times how it will unfold asterisk. You stop begging and you start thanking. You stop chasing and you start receiving. This is not arrogance, this is alignment. This is you remembering that you are not separate from the creative power that spun galaxies into being. You are an individualized expression of that power, and your word carries the same creative force. But faith must be times active asterisk. You cannot sit on your couch declaring abundance while clutching your poverty. You cannot affirm perfect health while obsessing over every symptom. You cannot claim your soulmate while constantly rehearsing past heartbreaks. Faith requires you to times live as though it is already done asterisk. This is what it means to act as if. Not pretending, not faking, but embodying the consciousness of the person who already has what you desire. How does that version of you walk? How do they spend their time? What do they think about? What do they no longer tolerate? You must become the vibrational match for your desire times before times it appears. This is the great secret that mystics have whispered for centuries. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you times are asterisk. And faith is the tool that allows you to become it before you see it. Let me share something that happened to a woman I worked with years ago. She came to me desperate for money. She had debts piling up, rent overdue, and every day she woke up thinking about what she didn't have. I asked her a simple question. What would you be doing right now if you already had all the money you needed? She looked at me, confused. But I don't have it. I know, I said, but what would you be doing if you did? She thought for a moment. I'd be peaceful. I'd stop checking my bank account every hour. I'd go for walks without this knot in my stomach. I'd probably help my neighbor who's struggling too. Then do that, I told her. Be peaceful now. Stop checking your account. Take the walk. Help your neighbor. But how can I act like I have money when I don't? And here's what I explained to her, and what I'm explaining to you now. Faith isn't about pretending you have the thing. It's about embodying the consciousness that would have the thing. There's a massive difference. When you pretend, you're lying to yourself. Your subconscious knows it's not true, and that resistance blocks everything. But when you embody the consciousness, you're aligning with the spiritual truth that supply is already yours. You're not pretending to have money. You're claiming the peace, the generosity, the freedom that money represents. And the universe responds to that frequency. Within 2 weeks, that woman received an unexpected check from a relative she hadn't heard from in years. Within a month, she got a job offer that doubled her previous salary. But here's what really changed. She stopped living in lack. Even before the money showed up, she had already shifted into abundance consciousness. This is what I mean when I say faith precedes the form. The inner state creates the outer condition, always. Now, I want to talk to you about what happens when you try to force things. So many people come to me and they say, Florence, I've been affirming, I've been visualizing, I've been doing everything right, but nothing's happening. And when I look closer, I see they're gripping. They're white-knuckling their desire. They're checking the mailbox 17 times a day. They're refreshing their bank account every hour. They're texting that person constantly, desperately, hoping for a response. This is not faith. This is fear dressed up in spiritual clothing. True faith has a quality of ease to it. It's relaxed. It knows. There's a difference between holding an intention and strangling an outcome. When you're in true alignment, you can state your desire clearly, you can feel it as already done, and then you can go about your day in peace. You don't need to monitor it constantly because you trust the universe is handling the details. Let me give you an example. I once knew a woman who wanted to sell her home. She set her intention, she blessed the house, she affirmed that the perfect buyer was already on their way. Then she cleaned it beautifully, made it presentable, and went about her life. She didn't obsess, she didn't panic when a week went by without a showing. She simply knew. Within 3 weeks, she had multiple offers, and one of them was well above her asking price. The buyer even told her, I felt drawn to this house. I can't explain it, but I knew it was meant to be mine. Now compare that to another person I worked with who also wanted to sell. This person was frantic. Every day without a buyer felt like a personal crisis. They kept lowering the price out of fear. They badmouthed the house to potential buyers, saying things like, "I know it needs work," or "I hope someone will take it off my hands." They were affirming lack with every word, every thought, every anxious moment. That house sat on the market for over a year. Do you see the difference? One person was working with the law. The other was working against it. And the law doesn't care about your effort if your effort is rooted in doubt. Because here's what most people do. They ask for something and then immediately begin to hedge their bets. They say, "I want this, but just in case it doesn't happen, I'm preparing for disappointment." That's not faith. That's rehearsing failure. You can't plant a seed and dig it up every day to check if it's growing. The constant checking is what kills it. Your worry is the shovel. Your doubt is the frost. I once knew a woman who was trying to sell her house. Every day, she'd walk through the rooms and say, "I'll never sell this place. The market is terrible. Nobody wants this." She'd call her friends and complain. She'd read articles about failing real estate markets. She saturated her mind with the evidence of what she didn't want. And then she'd wonder why the house sat empty, month after month. I said to her, "You're watering the wrong seed. You're feeding the thing you say you don't want." She changed her approach. She blessed the house. She thanked it for the perfect buyer who was already on their way. She stopped consuming content about market crashes and started imagining the joy of the family who would love that home. Within 2 weeks, she had an offer. Not because the market changed, because she did. You have to understand, your inner conversation is creating your outer reality. What you're saying to yourself when no one is listening is far more powerful than what you're saying out loud. If you're walking around all day thinking, "I'm broke, I'm stuck, I'm unlucky," then that's the instruction you're giving to the universe. You're ordering from the menu of limitation. And then you get upset when limitation shows up at your door. But when you change the inner conversation, when you start speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you're trying to encourage, everything shifts. You stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "What is this teaching me?" You stop saying, "I can't afford it," and start saying, "I'm open to creative solutions." You stop saying, "It's too late," and start saying, "Divine timing is perfect." You stop saying, "I'm not worthy," and start saying, "I was born worthy." These aren't just nice affirmations you paste on your bathroom mirror. This is the fundamental reshaping of your inner reality. Because here's what most people don't understand. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't fact check. It doesn't say, "Well, actually, that's not true based on your credit score." It simply accepts what you repeatedly tell it and then goes to work making it real. When you say, "I'm broke," your subconscious says, "Okay, broke it is. Let me find evidence to support that." And suddenly you notice every bill, every expense, every reason why money is tight. When you say, "I'm abundant," your subconscious says, "Okay, abundant it is. Let me show you opportunities." And suddenly you notice the refund check you forgot about, the client who reaches out, the idea that could generate income. Same reality, different filter, different results. I've watched people transform their entire financial situation just by changing how they speak to themselves in private. Not in public. Anyone can sound positive in public. I'm talking about that voice in your head when you're alone at 2 a.m., when you're looking at your bank account, when you're making decisions about what you can and cannot do. One woman I knew used to say, "I'll never get out of debt," every single day. It was her mantra. And guess what? She was right. For years she was right. Then one day, something shifted. She got so tired of her own story that she decided to try something different. She started saying, "I am becoming debt-free." Not even "I am debt-free," she couldn't believe that yet. Just, "I am becoming." Within 6 months, she had paid off more debt than she had in the previous 3 years. Not because she suddenly made more money, though that did happen, but because she started making different decisions. She stopped the impulsive spending that was a reaction to feeling poor. She noticed opportunities she'd been blind to before. She asked for the raise she'd been too scared to request. Within 3 months, her salary had increased. Within 6 months, she'd moved to a better apartment. Within a year, her entire financial reality had transformed, not because the external world suddenly decided to favor her, but because she had stopped vibrating at the frequency of poverty. This is what most people miss about affirmations. They think it's about tricking the universe. It's not. It's about realizing that you've been tricking yourself into limitation all along, and now you're simply telling the truth about what's actually possible. And here's what happens when you start speaking these truths consistently. The universe responds. Not because it's magically granting wishes, but because you've aligned yourself with the laws that govern manifestation. Think of it this way. If you plant tomato seeds and then spend every day worrying that you'll grow weeds, what happens? The seeds don't care about your worry. They follow their inherent design. They become tomatoes. Your anxiety doesn't change botanical law. But here's where the metaphor gets interesting. With your financial reality, you are the seed. And you're also the gardener. Your subconscious mind is the soil. And the thoughts you think, the words you speak, these are what you plant there every single day. Most people are planting poverty seeds while praying for wealth harvests. They're saying, I am prosperous, once in the morning, then spending the entire day thinking, I can't afford this, and money is so hard to come by, and rich people are lucky. That's like planting one tomato seed and 1,000 weed seeds, then wondering why your garden isn't producing the way you hoped. The power of persistent affirmation is that it changes the ratio. You start planting more prosperity seeds than poverty seeds. Eventually, the garden of your mind shifts. The wealth thoughts outnumber the lack thoughts. And your external reality, which is always a reflection of your internal landscape, begins to mirror that shift. I've watched this happen hundreds of times. The speed varies. The specific manifestations differ, but the pattern is always the same. Change the inner conversation, and the outer circumstances must follow. Because here's a truth that might upset people who are attached to their victim stories. You are not poor because of the economy. You are not struggling because of your parents, your education, your age, your location, or any other external factor. Those things may be circumstances. But circumstances are not causes. The cause is always consciousness. You see, there's a woman I knew who spent years blaming her parents for her unhappy marriage. She'd say, well, I never saw a good example of love growing up. How could I know any different? And it was true. Her childhood home had been cold, distant. But here's what she didn't see. Her sister, who grew up in that same house, had created a beautiful, loving marriage. Same parents, same circumstances, different consciousness. What changed for this woman? The moment she stopped saying, because of my past, and started saying, in spite of my past, I choose differently now. That shift, that tiny shift in consciousness, opened a door that had been closed for decades. This is what I mean when I say circumstances are not causes. They're just the stage set. You're the director of the play. Now, let me be clear about something, because this is where people often misunderstand spiritual law. When I say your consciousness creates your circumstances, I'm not saying you sit around thinking positive thoughts and wait for magic to happen. That's not how this works. Consciousness isn't just thought, it's conviction. It's the deep, unshakable knowing beneath your thoughts. You can affirm abundance all day long, but if underneath those words there's a trembling fear that whispers, but what if it doesn't work? Well, that fear is your real consciousness. And that's what's creating. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to what you truly believe is possible for you. I once knew a man who wanted to be successful in business. He'd say his affirmations faithfully. I am prosperous, I am successful. But every time an opportunity came, he'd find a reason it wouldn't work. The timing's not right. I don't have enough experience. Someone else could do it better. His words said one thing. His consciousness, his deep belief about himself said another. And guess which one won? The work, then, isn't just in changing your words. It's in changing the foundational belief. It's in going deeper than the surface and asking, what do I really believe about myself? What do I really believe I deserve? What do I really believe is possible? Because that deep place, that's where creation happens. And here's what I've learned to do with that awareness. I sit down, I get quiet, and I ask myself, asterisk, what would I claim if I truly believed the universe was on my side? Asterisk. Not what's realistic, not what's safe, not what people would approve of, but what would I claim if I really knew that the universe conspires in my favor? Sometimes the answer surprises me. Sometimes what rises up isn't what I thought I wanted at all. Sometimes it's simpler. Sometimes it's bigger. But it's always true. And then I do something that might seem small, but I promise you, it changes everything. I begin to speak times as if it's already done. Not in some fake, plastered-on way. Not pretending. But times aligning, times my words with the vision that's alive in me. I stop saying I hope and start saying I am. I stop saying someday and start saying now, in divine timing. I stop apologizing for my dreams and start declaring them. Because your words are not just sounds floating in the air, they are creative forces, they are seeds, and whatever you plant with your tongue, you will eventually harvest in your life. I knew a man once who spent years saying, I never have enough, never enough money, never enough time, never enough luck. And you know what? He was absolutely right. He didn't. Because every time he spoke that phrase, he was watering the very seeds of lack he claimed he wanted to uproot. One day, something shifted. He decided to try something different. Instead of, I never have enough, he began to say, even when his bank account said otherwise, I am always provided for. Everything I need comes to me. It felt awkward at first, almost dishonest. But he kept at it, and slowly, opportunity began to appear. Not because the universe suddenly woke up and noticed him, but because he woke up and began to notice what had been there all along. That's the power of your word. It's not magic. It's time's alignment asterisk. It's tuning your instrument to the frequency of what you truly desire. So what are you speaking over your life today? Are your words building the future you want, or reinforcing the past you're trying to leave behind? Because here's what I've learned through years of teaching this principle. Your words don't just describe your reality, they prescribe it. They don't just report on what is, they determine what will be. Every time you speak, you're either confirming your limitations or declaring your freedom. You're either agreeing with lack or aligning with abundance. Think about the language you use around money. Do you say, I can't afford that? Or do you say, I'm choosing to invest my resources elsewhere right now? The first statement is a declaration of poverty. The second is an assertion of choice and power. Do you say, I'm so broke? Or do you say, I'm in a period of financial reorganization? Your subconscious mind is listening to every word, taking notes, making it so. And it's not about lying to yourself. It's not about pretending you have money in the bank when you don't. It's about refusing to cement your current circumstances with the language of permanence. It's about speaking to the potential rather than the present, to the promise rather than the problem. I once counseled a woman who would say, every single day, I never have enough. She said it about time, about money, about energy, about love. And guess what her life reflected? Exactly that. Never enough. Until one day, I challenged her. What if, I said, you started saying, I always have exactly what I need when I need it? She resisted at first. It felt untrue, but she began anyway, as an experiment. Within weeks, opportunities appeared, resources showed up. The shift wasn't in her circumstances first, it was in her consciousness, activated by her words. Your word is your wand. Every statement is a spell you're casting over your own life. So cast wisely, speak deliberately. Choose your words like you're choosing the blueprint for a building, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're building your tomorrow with the words you speak today. So I'll ask you again, with even more urgency, what are you saying about yourself when no one else is listening?